My conversation partners today are Roger Penrose and William Lane Craig. So Roger Penrose is a celebrated mathematical physicist. Among many accomplishments, he worked alongside Stephen Hawking to produce the Penrose-Hawking singularity theorems, which helped to confirm Big Bang cosmology. He's described himself as an atheist, but has rejected the idea that the universe is purposeless, saying, "I think that there is something much deeper about its existence, which we have very little inkling of at the moment." Professor William Lane Craig is a renowned Christian philosopher and the founder of Reasonable Faith, an organisation seeking to defend Christianity through reason and evidence. He's well known for arguments for the existence of God, such as the Kalam cosmological argument and the fine-tuning of the universe for life. He believes that God is the best explanation for the origins of the universe and why we find ourselves in it. So today we'll be looking at the deep mysteries of the universe and whether its complexity, order, origins, and the fact it produced us points beyond itself, and if so, to what? So Bill and Roger, welcome along to the programme.
My pleasure.
It's great to have you both with me. I feel like a kid in a sweet shop because having you both here is something of a dream come true for me.
Well, I want to say right at the beginning how acutely aware I am of the tremendous privilege of being on the same program with one of the world's greatest cosmologists, and I feel honored to be talking with Dr. Penrose today.
Well, it's a huge pleasure and honor for me too. So,
well, I'm glad that we're all in mutual agreement on these issues, at least, of how much we're glad to be here.
Something, yeah.
Let's see what we disagree on in the course of the program. But let's have some introductions to you both. Roger, what drew you first of all to science and maths in particular as a young man?
I think it was largely my father who had a great. I mean, he was a scientist, a human geneticist, mainly, medically trained, but also he philosophically and mathematically trained. So he had a good understanding of maths, and I think he had mainly it was a sort of playful understanding, like puzzles. He was a great chess problemist. And also, well, chess was big in the family. My younger brother became British chess champion 10 times, which was, of course...
which tells me something about the way your brains are wired, perhaps, as well.
Well, it wasn't quite the same with all of us, but Oliver, my older brother, was also an excellent chess player, became a Cambridge University champion, for example.
There you go.
But I wasn't at all. I was not interested in chess. But I was very much interested in puzzles and games, well... mathematical kinds of puzzles and also physical geometrical puzzles and things like that. So that was an important feature of my upbringing, I think. But we used to go for long walks and looking at plants and talking about the universe in various ways.
Did faith ever feature in your childhood or not particularly?
I would say no, it didn't. In the sense of a particular religion, no. You see, my father came from a Quaker family, so he had that kind of background, but he had very much sort of sympathies with Quaker, he was very much a pacifist and that sort of thing. He didn't like conflict. And but he wasn't a believer in the sense of religious believer. He wasn't a Christian, certainly, nor was my mother. So that was not part of the family upbringing.
And did you ever have any brushes yourself with religion growing up or as a student?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, maybe at the age of 7 or 6 or something. I'm not sure we count that sort of thing. I'm not. No, I wouldn't even say that then either. I think there was a big question mark in what's going on, yes, but not...
I was going to say, I mean, as your scientific career progressed, did that open up any of those big questions about where did this all come from?
Well, there was a curious thing. I remember at one time when we were in Canada during the war years, and we used to go every Sunday to Sunday school, you see. And I think my younger brother, Jonathan, asked the question, you see... We were a bit suspicious that this was just a way of getting us out of the house so that they could have some peace, you see. And Jonathan asked my mother, I said, whether she really believed it, and she got this embarrassed look on her face. But this was apparently indication that I don't think there was any confession to us that they hadn't actually
Right.
been confident that this was the truth. It was a way of having some peace during Sundays.
Mm.
And Jonathan sang in the choir.
Well,
I remember this was
Right.
so that kind of aspect of things.
has in a sense, has any of that filtered through to you in terms of at least appreciating the? Often people talk about the majesty of choral singing.
Oh, yeah.
At Oxford University, where you have been based for a long time, there are beautiful chapels and
Oh yes,
services
no, I
available.
think all that it makes a huge impression on me. Yes, and music. I mean, well, I'm a tremendous fan of Bach, you see, and I think that there's, there's something absolutely incredible in the music, and I can understand. I mean, he was driven by his religious faith, Christianity, and obviously it was a hugely important thing, and the expression of that in music can be extremely moving.
Yeah. We'll come back. I want to talk to you about your work with Stephen Hawking, obviously, and that will feed into what we're talking about on the show today. But let's introduce you, Bill, on the show. It's wonderful to have you here. I suppose in many ways, the sort of things that Roger has been working on throughout his life have been very influential in some of the important arguments you've been making for the existence of God. Because I think in the 1970s that you started to really engage with Big Bang cosmology and see that there was an interesting and fruitful relationship here with some other philosophical arguments.
Yes. Interestingly, my background sounds rather similar to Roger's in terms of my upbringing. I think you were actually more involved in church activities than I was.
Interesting.
My parents were at best nominal Christians, but we never attended church. But when I became a teenager, I began to ask what I call the big questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the meaning of my existence? And as I looked at the universe, I could see no meaning to my existence. I knew that humanity would eventually perish in the heat death of the universe, and I could see no reason for its existence, for the existence of human beings, and in particular for my existence. And I simply faced an inevitable death in which I would cease to exist. And so for me, it was these big, deep, existential philosophical questions that eventually, through the witness of a girl who sat in front of me in my high school German class, led me to faith in Christ. And as a Christian, to finally get to your question, Justin, it's important for me to have a synoptic worldview. That is to say, a worldview that includes a Christian perspective on all of the different facets of human learning, whether it be the sciences, literature, art, psychology, history, philosophy, and the deep metaphysical questions. So you're correct. When I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the Kalam cosmological argument under John Hick at the University of Birmingham, one of the things I began to explore was whether there might not be some sort of scientific confirmation for the claim of the Kalam cosmological argument that the universe began to exist. And I was startled to see the degree to which contemporary astrophysics did support this premise, in no small part because of Professor Penrose's work on the singularity theorems. So that is an important part of my worldview as a Christian.
And hence why you've been engaging with Roger's work really a lot of your life. And I know that you yourself have had a number of discussions and dialogues with significant scientists and philosophers. It's obviously a hugely contested argument, but one that I think we'll get to some of the interesting aspects of it in the course of today's discussion. Thank you very much both for joining me on the show today. Roger, I said I wanted to ask you about Stephen Hawking, of course, who was a brilliant mind, a convinced atheist, though, and especially latterly, he came to believe that science had ruled God out, or at least as an explanation of the universe. How far did you agree with your former colleague on that?
Well, you see, there's a huge irony in all this, of course, which is my view about the origin of the universe. And I remember hearing there was a bit on there was a new book of Stephen's
posthumously published. Yeah.
Yes, which and there's a chapter in which he talks about the origin and the Big Bang, and I thought it was the most unconvincing part of the whole thing. So, well, you see, the huge irony here is that I've changed my mind on all this. So the singularity theorems were, as you described, these were confirmation of this singular origin. And the word singular has to be explained here. It means a place where, essentially where your equations go to infinity and you have to give up. Or in other words, it's where your equations cease to work, and they stop telling you what to do, if you like. And the idea is we take observations about the expansion of the universe and the equations of Einstein and try to extrapolate backwards and use general theorems which show that you really can't evade the singular origin. So that's where the equations blow up, and you can't rely on the equations to tell you what happened at the beginning state. And Stephen has a particular way of looking at that, which was an interesting way. I don't think it works myself. He developed an idea with James Hartle, an American in California, very very interesting man, and I think the idea is a very interesting one. But I have some problems with it.
You have some major reservations.
Yes, but the main thing is that my current view is that the Big Bang, although it existed, there was a Big Bang, was not the beginning. And so that there was something prior to the Big Bang. But if you like, the original reasons for my thinking about this are a bit like the kind of thing you're talking about, about what the universe is for, why, what's it doing, and kind of that kind of question. Shall I go into that?
Well, let's leave it for the moment, because I do want to go into where you are now with your cosmology, which is utterly fascinating and mind-bending at some level. But maybe we should start at a more sort of fundamental level, because I quoted in my introduction from a quote of yours. I'll read it out in full now. You say, "There's a certain sense in which I would say the universe has a purpose. It's not there just somehow by chance. Some people take the view that the universe is simply there and it runs along. It's a bit as though it just sort of computes and we happen by accident to find ourselves in this thing. I don't think that's a very fruitful or helpful way of looking at the universe. I think there's something much deeper about it, about its existence, which we have very little inkling of at the moment." And you've obviously written as well at length and spoken of the fact that you see that there's a sort of three ways in which you can look at reality: the mental, the physical, the abstract. And in some sense, you actually believe there is more to this reality than simply the physical aspect, that many people, many of your atheist colleagues would say, well, that's all that ultimately exists here. Roger, do you want to just begin by sort of spelling that out, what your worldview is in that sense?
Well, you mentioned when you say my worldview, you mentioned the three worlds, which I often use to describe. Like, these are things also, the three mysteries, if you like. Well, one of these, you say there's the physical world, things like tables and so on, and what we think of as the physical world, although it's not quite clear when we go deeply into what's going on, what that really means, but never mind about that. The physical world, and then there's the mental world, that's our experiences, consciousness, feelings about things, so on. And then there's what you call the abstract world. I would be more specific about that. It's a mathematical abstraction. So we're thinking about how it is that... Well, let me secondly explain the mysteries, you see.
Go ahead.
Mystery number one is the fact that this world of physics seems to depend so extraordinarily precisely, and the more we explore it, the more precise we see this is. It's so precisely guided by mathematical equations. So we have these mathematical, let's not just say equations, that's a bit too specific, mathematical principles,
yes,
which govern in such a precise way the way this physical world operates. And there is, if you like, a huge mystery I'm calling it a mystery. These things, we're never quite sure whether...
is this what Eugene Wigner famously
Yes.
spoke as the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics? It just seems to be
Exactly.
an extraordinarily remarkable fact that mathematics, that the universe seems to be written in that language, and that we can discover it.
That's exactly it, yes. Yes. And the more we know about how things operate, I mean, now there's such extraordinary precision there are in measurements. Well, Einstein's general relativity is very, very precisely determined. And laws of quantum mechanics and how they interrelate with, even with gravity in some respects. I mean, how clocks... one of the Einstein's predictions is that a clock up high will run more slowly than one down here. And this precision in that... I'm sorry, I got it the wrong way around.
But I know what you mean, yes.
That,
the precision
is
extraordinary. Yeah.
But the precision, even from down here to maybe a centimeter above, and they can measure the difference.
Yes.
So these are extraordinarily precise. Now, it just shows that the mathematical theories, when we really understand them and when we get them right, they're still not quite right, well, that's clear. But nevertheless, the precision is extraordinary. So that's mystery number one. Mystery number two is how is it that conscious experience can arise when the circumstances seem to be right. Now, it doesn't seem to be probably... I'm just guessing, but I don't think it's present in that glass or in the water in the glass.
No.
But nevertheless, it seems to come about certainly with human beings, and I think with other animals. I don't think it's unique to human beings.
Certain brain
at all.
structures somehow seem to give rise to to this consciousness.
And there is a genuine mystery, I think, and it's not just a matter of complicated computations. There's something much more subtle going on. So that's mystery number two. And mystery number three is our ability to use our conscious understanding to comprehend mathematics and these very extraordinary and self-consistent but deep ideas which are very far from our experiences. So that's how we comprehend mathematics, if you like.
And in that sense, you believe that mathematics, for instance, is discovered rather than invented by us. In that sense, it exists independently of us.
Yes, right. Yes.
And one of those great mysteries, as you say, is the fact that we can access it. Seems itself a remarkable feat of reality.
That's right, because it's so indirectly connected with our existence and how we get along in the world, and how natural selection has helped us to survive and so on. It's really hard to see how these things come about from that.
There's three big mysteries there to kick us off with. Bill, what's your response to some of these huge
Well,
areas?
I want to say first and foremost that one of the most exciting things about Roger's thinking is this deep metaphysical vision of reality that he has. It's in such contrast to the sort of positivistic and verificationistic pronouncements of many scientists who think that philosophy is dead and that these metaphysical questions are meaningless. Roger is engaged in questions that are not simply physical or scientific. These are meta-physical questions. And I think that the fundamental issue that is raised by this tripartite metaphysics is the ancient philosophical problem of the one and the many. That is to say, what is the underlying unity of these three seemingly disparate realms of reality, the mental, the abstract, and the physical? These realms of reality are so different, so causally unconnected, it seems, that one wonders what is the underlying unity for all of these. So how are these three realms related? For example, the mathematical abstract realm cannot be the source of the physical or conscious mental realm, because abstract objects by definition are causally effete. That's part of what it means to be an abstract object. The number 7, for example, has no effect upon anything. So the abstract realm cannot provide the source of unity. Could it be the physical realm that provides the source? Well, Roger's already mentioned the second mystery. How does the physical give rise to consciousness, particularly intentionality. The intentionality is the aboutness of our mental states. I can think about my summer vacation. No physical object has intentionality. So the mental is difficult to derive from the physical, and the abstract, it seems to me, is impossible because the mathematical realm is characterized by necessity. These are logically necessary truths, and by its plenitude. There are infinite realms of mathematical objects. And the physical realm, by contrast, is contingent and therefore cannot ground these logical and mathematical truths, and it's plausibly finite as well. So the physical can't be the support. Now, what about the mental? Could the mental be the source of these other two realms? Well, in mental causation, we do have the experience of the mental causing physical changes in our brain. I can will to get up or to speak. Similarly, many philosophers have thought that the abstract realm is not really a separate realm that exists by itself, but they are ideas in the mind of consciousness, that they are the result of intellection by a mind. Now, the problem is that no human mind could be the source of the abstract realm because of its plenitude and necessity, whereas we are contingent and finite. So what I want to invite Roger to comment on is, why couldn't the mental realm include an infinite consciousness? That is to say, an omniscient mind which has created the physical realm and which is the source of the abstract mathematical realm. This would solve the problem of the one and the many and give you an underlying unity for this tripartite metaphysic that you affirm.
And what you've just described sounds suspiciously like God, Bill.
Yes, it did sound suspiciously like that, yes.
Roger, what do you say to that?
Well, you see, you're putting it as an interesting... you're putting it in the mental world, if you like, whereas I tend to put it in the Platonic mathematical world. You see, that I don't quite see why. I mean, how do you drive the precision? You see, just a mental thing doesn't seem to me. But I don't quite see why it helps, if you like. I mean, you can postulate a supermental being or something. I mean, does it have a mental existence without a physical one? Is that the idea?
Yes.
So
yes,
there
and
would
so
be
that
some,
this mind, this omniscient mind, has created a contingent physical realm, and is the source of the conceptual realm as well.
I can't quite see. Well, you could say that it contains all that, because it's so infinite that it contains the entire mathematical world in a sense. But does it? Where does it come from? What's its?
Well, it would have to be metaphysically necessary in order to be the source of broadly logically necessary mathematical truths, and I would say other sorts of truths, ethical truths that are plausibly necessary.
Yes, it's very curious. You see, you have the mental world sort of being a necessary,
right,
and I have the mathematical world somehow being a necessity because it's somehow mathematical truths somehow. Yes,
I appreciate the necessity, but the problem is that the abstract realm has no causal powers. These are causally effete objects that never come into contact with things physically. They can't move them or shove them or pull them. They exert no forces. They are not minds, and so they can't make decisions to cause things. They're not causal agents. So it seems to me that positing the abstract realm as fundamental is causally inadequate, and what one would gain from what I'm proposing would be a solution to these three mysteries. It would give explanatory depth to your worldview.
I don't quite see how it explains anything. I mean, does it? I mean, you're talking from a perspective of a religious person, and therefore one's thinking of this as somehow. I mean, specific religions are much more specific than
right, and that's why I grimaced a bit when you said from a religious perspective.
Yes.
It's a philosophical perspective, but
okay.
it
No,
isn't.
I'm happier with that, because then you see, this is what I have more trouble if one's trying to make it specific in certain directions as regards one religion or another. But if it's just such an abstract notion, it's not that I'm necessarily unhappy with it, except that I don't know what to do with it, because it's so vague.
That's interesting.
I think that's my trouble.
I mean, just for my benefit,
yes.
this abstract realm of mathematical objects and so on.
Yes.
You say it's there. It's a mystery why it's there, how
no,
it's
I
there.
wasn't calling that the mystery. Yes. See, the mysteries are the connections. I like to draw this picture with the three worlds, you see. The worlds are there. The mysteries are the connections between the worlds. So mystery number one was how somehow out of a small part of this mathematical totality, we see physical laws. And it's only a very small part. I mean, you look at any old journal, pretty well mathematical journal, you see it's full of things. I'm talking about pure mathematics. It's full of things which certainly don't purport to have any connection whatsoever with the physical world. I mean, some of those seem to have, and it seems to be a very tiny part of that world, which has to do with the operation of the physical world. So that's one of the mysteries. And then the next mystery is why it is that a very small part of what we call the physical world, organized in just a very specific way, comes about very rarely. I mean, all these planets around, how many of them actually do we think has life of any sort in it? Conscious life? That's a huge question.
Yeah.
But anyway, whatever, it's a very tiny part of that which gives rise to mentality as far as we can see. And then it's a very tiny part of our mentality. I mean, even mathematicians don't spend the whole time thinking about mathematics. They have other activities which, they go to the movies sometimes. They have a love life, some of them at least. And
so when Bill tries to solve that mystery by saying, well, what if there is an underlying explanation to it? It's all contained within a divine mind.
It's putting the divine mind in one of these worlds, you see, which I find a little bit. Yeah. I find that a little bit. Not just asymmetrical. I just find it not very explanatory. Put it like
Why
that.
not? Why do you find that this doesn't?
Well, you just say, there is somehow a super mentality, and it can do anything. I don't know. I don't know.
Well,
I think I would need to have more of an explanation about exactly.
Well, for example, take mystery number one, the applicability of mathematics. I think this is a huge issue, because on Platonism, you have this abstract, atemporal, non-spatial realm of causally effete objects, and the physical world happens to operate according to certain mathematical principles that you've described. And as Mary Lang, who is a philosopher of mathematics at the University of Liverpool, has said, on Platonism, the applicability of mathematics to the physical world is a happy coincidence, which just seems incredible. By contrast, we know that minds can design things. And the view that there is an omniscient mind who has designed the physical world on the mathematical blueprint that it had in mind is a very ancient perspective that goes back to Middle Platonism and people like Philo of Alexandria, who said that the intelligible world, the intelligible cosmos, exists first in the mind of the Logos, the divine intellect, and then is instantiated in the physical world by the Logos who creates the world on this blueprint. And that seems to me to be a good solution to the one and the many problem.
I think it's that you call it a solution. The trouble is I think my problem is it's too vague. I don't see how you can do much with this particular view. You see, we when it comes to the explanation of how a physical world operates in terms of mathematics, it's extraordinarily precise, and one can say an awful lot about that. But a statement like the one you make here worries me, because it's you can call it a solution, but it doesn't tell us very much.
Well,
I don't
but
even
it
know what
solves the mystery.
I don't even know when you say that.
Is it because it's very hard to then investigate this explanation itself, that if you like, there's a mystery behind the mysteries?
You need to be able to say, how could you contradict such a view? You see, it's so vague in a way. I mean, why wasn't there a mind which was in some malicious? Well, maybe it is malicious. I don't know. We don't. It's just saying it's a mind without telling us.
Right. I haven't said anything about the moral properties of this intellect, but I would be prepared to. I mentioned earlier that among the logically necessary truths that this mind would know and ground would be not only mathematical truths, but certain ethical truths. I think certain ethical principles are not contingent, but are necessarily true. And so this would provide a grounding for the objectivity of moral values and duties in a paradigmatic good. This being would be not only the source of the mathematical realm, but of the ethical realm in being the supreme good. And so now we're beginning to add a little more content to this notion. As the creator of the physical realm, this mind would have to be uncaused, timeless, spaceless, immaterial, enormously powerful. In order to cause the ethical realm, it would have to be good, perfectly good, and to cause the mathematical realm, it would have to be omniscient. And so we're winding up, I think, with a very rich theological ultimate.
I don't know, yes. I mean, of course, you're touching on these other Platonic aspects, like morality,
right.
and well, you didn't refer to the beauty aspect of too.
Good point. Aesthetic values as well.
So one has those three Platonic aspects, and one can extend the idea of the, truth, if you like, which is perhaps the mathematical part of the of the Platonic notions, and to other three as well, which I'm quite happy to consider. But I guess that my problem is that it's just, I said this before, it's just too vague to know what to do with it. I mean, you can make these words, you say, well, it does this and it does that and it does that and explains this and that, but in a way which I don't quite see.
Is it because,
what it buys us.
I mean, speaking as a scientist, let's say Bill has this hypothesis that God is the ultimate explanation and grounds these various phenomena that you believe in and you see. Is it that you find the hypothesis itself doesn't do it because you can't investigate that particular hypothesis?
I think that's the main problem I have with it.
It's
a bit hard to know what to do with it.
And inevitably goes beyond science in that sort of way.
Exactly. I mean, we're doing metaphysics here, not physics. This is a metaphysical vision of reality consisting of a tripartite division of realms that have very mysterious interconnections. And so what I'm suggesting is a metaphysical hypothesis that will provide unity in the diversity and solves the one and the many. And I think it's pretty specific. I rattled off a number of the properties that this mind must possess, and that I think that's not.
Let me raise an issue with you then, because if we're putting this thing in the mental world, then to me that means it would be possible to be that thing. So that means one could be this entity, this God, or whatever one calls it, and I find that really hard to perceive. I mean, somehow with a being of this sort, with this kind of total control over the whole thing, I mean, it's so much at odds with my own, well, certainly experiences of what conscious experience is, that I don't quite see.
Do you believe
to call
in
it a
free
conscious
will?
thing?
Do you believe we have free will?
I think there is something there which is not explained by. But I mean, it goes into some technical issues here about the operation of the world, and where our understanding of physics might have a gap in it, and so on. And maybe one could call that a free will. I would maintain an open mind when it comes to that question.
Well, then, if this being has elected to create agents with freedom of the will, then it's not true that it's in control of everything.
Does the being have the will, have the freedom not to have all this?
Well,
could it not do that somehow?
I think that that's a further question to be explored. It would seem to me that as the creator of the physical realm, it would be very easy for this mind to have created a world with no free moral agents in it, a world in which the highest form of life is, say, rabbits, and there wouldn't be any free will. But if
I don't know, maybe rabbits do. I'm not sure about that
well,
one.
however that may be, if this being has elected to create significant moral agents that are endowed with freedom of the will, then it means that not everything that happens is controlled by this being in a marionette sort of fashion. And that would gel, I think, nicely with our experience. I think that this gels with our experiences of beauty, of ethical norms and obligations that press upon us, and with respect to our own freedom to transcend the physical realm and not be simply determined. So this really fits beautifully with our experience, I think.
What would it take, I suppose I'd be interested to know, Roger, what would it take to move you from acknowledging the mystery and the depth of what is the reality we live in to acknowledging a source of the sort that Bill is pointing to?
I just don't see why it's a solution to these problems. I think that's my real issue. I mean, you can postulate that there is some kind of a thing which one could call a god, I suppose, and that thing is supposed to inhabit this world, which is the mental world. To me, that's a hypothesis which I can't quite see what to do with. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I just can't see why one should attribute this thing, which is somehow the answer to all questions, should inhabit the world of the...
It sounds like you'd rather have the questions than put that sort of an explanation to the questions.
Yes, I think, I mean, there could be a truth in such a view, but I don't see why I'm driven to believe that. And I don't see why it should be a conscious thing. You see, this is, I mean, it could be. I'm not saying I deny it.
Okay.
I just don't see the explanation, why this explains very much. To say that this entity, a godlike entity, whatever it is something with a consciousness of its own. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong, and it might be that there is such a thing. Maybe one, like in some religious views, after death, somehow one's consciousness becomes part of that thing. I'm not saying I think that's a wrong view. I don't necessarily think it's a wrong view.
Let's have one response,
Yes.
and then we'll move on to
Yeah.
some of the specifics of cosmology here.
I'm not trying to drive anyone to a conclusion. I'm offering a metaphysical solution to what you admit are profound mysteries in your own worldview, where we have these three disparate realms of reality that don't seem to connect very well. And given that you've already got the mental realm, you've already got the realm of mind, it's a small step to postulate an omniscient mind.
But why don't you see? We've already got the physical world. You see, you could
Yes.
say, why don't we put it there?
Well,
We've got
I
the
already spoke
mathematical
to that.
world. Why don't we put it there?
Right, I already spoke to that
so-
because you can't put it in the abstract realm because that realm is causally effete. You can't put it in the physical realm because the physical realm is contingent and finite, and therefore cannot explain the logically necessary and infinite abstract realm, and it's very difficult to explain the mental realm too on the basis of purely physical causes.
But I think you're just saying it's not here and it's not there. It doesn't mean it's in the third place. It might not be anywhere.
Well, no. I mean, if there are these three realms of reality, and the unity, the underlying unity, can't be found in two, it follows logically that it's going to be found in the third unless there is no unity to be found at all.
Well, maybe the unity is something much deeper than any of these pictures.
Well, then
it's contained. It has to do more with the totality of all three, in some sense,
Well, then it
rather
would
than
be-
putting it in the mental world.
Yeah.
So putting it in the mental world is giving it I mean, degrading it in a way. I think that's what I feel about it.
It feels unbalanced to you in
yes,
some
it's
way.
imbalanced, and if it has free will and somehow,
Yes.
then that's somehow degrading it, because
Oh, my.
it says it could somehow have done something else. It's like us. It's too much like us. It's too
Maybe
much
we're like
like
him.
putting it like yes, like ancient views of well, the Greek views of the gods in some sense. They were like too much like
but
us.
they were finite and contingent. Here we're talking about a metaphysically necessary source of the Platonic realm and
But
the
is it-
physical world. This is not.
But is
And
it
perhaps
conscious?
significantly, the Judeo-Christian traditions, of course, do speak of humanity being made in the image of God. That there is that
another-
sense
yes,
in which
yes. I think
we
that's
reflect
the kind
that.
of thing I'm having trouble with.
that
Yes,
you're having trouble with that
exactly.
idea.
Yes.
Well, it's been a fascinating conversation already, gentlemen. I've really enjoyed it. Why don't we move to one of these specific...